What's up, government seekers? We're back. We are back. I was traveling. We're going to talk all about that. I was in El Salvador. So it's episode 127. We've got some exciting stuff. So like, share, and subscribe. If you're watching on Lee's channel, make sure you subscribe to mine. If you're watching on my channel, make sure you subscribe to Lee's. We're also streaming on the Rockfin. Hello, everybody on the Rockfin. Share this. Share this out on your social media. That always helps. We have our moderators, Holly Horn and Blaze Silverwolf. Audio source not working. Sweet. All right. I'll try it. Yes. All right, this is what we're gonna have to do. For some reason, my microphones are not working great, so we're gonna just have to use the built-in microphone on my laptop. All right. Well, that was a bag of dicks, right? Bag of robot dicks. Now can everybody hear me? Yeah, it won't be great sound, but whatever. This is how it is. Let me know if you can hear me all right. It's hot here in LA suddenly. Yeah, all right, you hear me. All right. This is what happens when you break down your studio to take most of it to Central America and then set it back up again. Something didn't work. But I'm drinking some Romulan ale, and we're gonna have a good time. All right, let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Government Secrets with Lee Camp and Graham Elwood, the two most censored comedians in the world, episode 127.
Hey, man, I think you got to have your bag of robot dicks plugged in. It's the only way they work.
I always forget to plug in my bag of robot dicks. Dude, what's your background? What's going on? Or are you in the studio or something?
It just occurred to me as I was getting ready. I was like, I feel like I've had this background now for roughly a month, but it's probably only been 2.5 weeks. So it was probably like the day after we taped the last one. And I got to be honest, I don't remember what our podcast is about anymore. Is it we talk about musicals we liked? Is that?
Yeah, pretty much. We pick our favorite musicals and we just talk about what made them great and who's the favorite singer and that's kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's all we talk about.
We mix we mix musicals with fun math equations. Was that right?
Yes. It's music. It's the Music and Math podcast. We've been doing this for years.
God, it's been a while. I'll get it. Just
Are you like in like, did you set up like a studio or something? What did you do? Because usually you just have like bookshelves behind you or something.
I mean, this was always the plan. It just took months and months and months. But yeah, no, I have what I call a studio, what some would call a basement. I'm proud. A basement. It's weird to be in a world where a basement is literally a step up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like,
looks a lot better.
I'm jealous. And they don't even have basements in California. So I'm like, wow, you get a basement? That's cool. You get to.
Totally. I mean, I just have to hope the type of spiders crawling across my feet are not the poisonous kind.
Now, is this sort of crawl space for a serial killer type basement, or like fun game room?
Is there any other kind of crawl space? Is there crawl space not for a serial killer? No, it's a rather large basement, but it's just a basement. Yeah. But I got a TV background. I'm so weird technologically that I now have this massive TV to be my background, but I don't have it hooked up to any cable, so I don't have any television connection. There's no like channels that can be watched.
Isn't it like a smart TV though, where you could get Wi-Fi and watch Netflix or something?
Yeah, I couldn't get my Wi-Fi to work, so I couldn't. It just kept telling me wrong password, so I gave up. So basically, I'm using an extra large television as a painting.
Yeah, that's when I just finally decided to. I was doing that for years, where I just put this cloud thing and had it printed on a piece of cloth for $20, and then I just tape it.
But now you can't watch porn in between live streams on that. You gotta act it out yourself.
I always act it out. I'm more of a theatrical. Yeah, I always act it out. That's what I do with my stuffed animals. It's not weird at all. Nothing weird about that. Nothing creepy.
Nothing creepy. Don't ask why Catwoman stuffed animal looks like that.
Every guy takes his Catwoman stuffed animal onto the park and walks and talks to her. That's totally normal. I do that.
Absolute. So tell me about El Salvador.
Oh man, it was such a spectacular. As I was down there I was going to be there for 8 days. I extended it to 10.
You extended it to 10, but then I saw that the days shot up to like 12 because inflation.
Right. Yeah. It was after the exchange rate shot up to 12 days. It was so amazing on so many levels. First of all, seeing sort of Bitcoin adoption was cool. Like, and certain parts of the country have more of it than others.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like how much is it adopted? Is it like what percentage of stores is it just out front use Bitcoin?
Well, if you're in El Zonte Beach, which is nicknamed Bitcoin Beach, that's where the whole sort of movement started. It's probably 80 to 90% of the businesses in El Zonte Beach use it. When you get into the capital city, San Salvador, it's probably 50%. I think if you were going to call the whole nation, it's probably, complete average, it would probably be about 40%, which is pretty amazing adoption considering President Bukele passed the law in June of 21. It became law in September of 21. So we're not even 2 full years of adoption. And America, for example, probably has like 1% of the stores in America, use Bitcoin. So
right, would even accept Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. And the ease of which it's done was the stores that did accept it, there was a couple of times where they hadn't figured it out yet and it didn't work. But for the most part, the stores that accepted it, it was so quick. You use these lightning apps. They would basically draw up an invoice with a QR code And then I'd open my app, the Phoenix app, and I'd scan a picture of it, and then I would pay them. And it was like bing, bing. I mean, it was very quick, and the fees were minimal. And like I rented a surfboard using Bitcoin. I bought a thing of water, like at snacks at a little market. I paid for lunch at several restaurants using that.
So like 5 years from now, you will realize that you spent $1 billion of Bitcoin while you were there, correct?
Yeah, but if Bitcoin goes through the roof, yeah, I'll be like, that would have cost me. I mean, my rental car I paid with Bitcoin. The tour guide, Sandy Waves, she's like basically a Bitcoin tour guide. She's a Bitcoiner, and she's getting Bitcoiners to come to the country, and she's showing them around the country. And she's like, I paid her in Bitcoin. There's certain ATMs around the country where you could use your Bitcoin to get cash. So they use the US dollar. And so there's still a lot of places.
So the other main currency is US dollar?
Yeah. But the other thing that was the most spectacular was the fact that it was March of 2022 when Bukele, well, first he locked up about 30,000 guys in a day. And then after about 3 weeks, he got most like 65 out of 70,000 gang members locked up. 5,000 fled the country, roughly. So it's a nation of 6.5 million people. So roughly 1% of the population was causing all of the crimes. And what I didn't realize, in just about everybody in El Salvador was paying extortion to these gangsters. So, and it was roughly, and I had dinner with Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert, and they told me that $6 billion a year was paid in extortion money by El Salvadorians to these gangsters. Their GDP is 28 billion a year. So 6 billion of that was going to extortion money. So when he locked everybody up, it's basically like the whole country got a 20 to 30% pay raise.
But I like the way that we do it here in the United States. Like, they don't take bribes from us on the street level. We just send $4 trillion to Wall Street during the pandemic. So I feel like that's just more convenient.
It is, and it's a more sanitized way of sticking it to the American people on every day.
Yeah. It's not this back alley, grease in the palms stuff.
No, it's very, very civilized form of fisting every American. So, yeah, I mean, so El Salvador, so there's this like renaissance happening in this country. I mean, it's really, and again, talking to Max and Stacey at dinner, they made a great point. They were in Berlin right as the wall came down, and they felt like it sort of had that vibe of like, so I went to a neighborhood where we would have been killed 18 months prior, and
how did, I mean, this might be getting too into the weeds, but how did they decide who were the criminals causing the most harm? And
it was pretty easy to determine because the gangs, they all had gang tattoos. I mean,
it's like the Home Alone with the wet bandits. They just, all the houses that were drenched in water were the.
And speaking of a government secret, a lot of them were incarcerated in mainly California prisons, where one of the gangs was the MS-13. So they literally, in the California penal system, would tattoo 13s on their face so they could know what gang was what in the prisons. And another gang had an 18. So these guys had 13s and 18s tattooed on their face. So it was like, yep, you right there. You're and
see, I went and got a tattoo, and I asked for a mermaid, and he just wrote crypt on across my back. And I don't like, is that going to be bad later? Or
I think that could come back to haunt you, Lee, but I don't want to scare you. So yeah, it was, and these guys apparently did horrible stuff. I mean, they raped and murdered, and they killed pregnant women. I mean, it was awful stuff that they did. Awful. So, some people are like, what about the human rights? And every El Salvadorian I spoke to was like, what about our human rights? What about what these awful guys were doing? Now, some of the people, the families of the gang members that were benefiting from the extortion money, they're probably the small percentage of people that aren't happy with what happened. But Bukele now has a 93% approval rating.
I think last I checked, Biden's was 92, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's just
shy.
It's so close.
No, I think Biden's is down roughly at the same approval rating as gonorrhea.
Yeah, I think gonorrhea has actually done a little better because at least to get gonorrhea, you have some fun.
To get Biden, this nation did not have any fun.
So it was amazing. I mean, and then the Bitcoiners that are down there, they're very clear. Like and the president passed a law. They separated Bitcoin from crypto. Like they're not doing altcoins down there, just Bitcoin.
Shit, I have 900 billion Litecoin. I don't know what to do with that.
You can just send it my way. I'll figure it out for you, buddy. I'll take care of it.
I've got a lot of coin that I think has a face of a snake on it, or it might be a Klingon. I don't know.
Yeah, those will be very valuable, I'm assuming, at some point. And
so it's just Bitcoin.
Just Bitcoin. In fact, they passed a law that said altcoins are securities like stocks, and Bitcoin is a commodity like gold. And the people that are down there, the Bitcoin people that are down there, are really like investing in the country and trying to like help out. They're like English classes and giving back to the country. And it was really impressive to see. It was really, I having been traveling around America the last year or so, the 6-week tour I did in Europe where we did shows, I can't say I've been in a place in Europe or America where there's like a lot of hope, you know, and there is hope in that country. People are like, it's so that was really cool thing, and it's still a developing country. There's a lot of stuff they need to do, but everywhere I saw was construction. They're building new roads. They're building 2 new hospitals. There's, and the people are like safe to do stuff now to make money. And so all that money they were paying in extortion, now they can like reinvest it in their little pupusa stand or whatever, or their little shop or so it's, I don't know. And all the El Salvadorians I spoke to were like, I love Bukele. He's great. Love it. His country's safe.
To play devil's advocate, there's a lot about Bitcoin I like, but it did drop from 60 to now it's at 30, I guess. So $1,000. Did that impact them when that happened? And
actually, yeah, that's a great thing to bring up. So a lot of people, when he first passed the law, were like, this is awesome. And then when the price really dropped hard, some people were like, oh man. So that's a hurdle. But one of the things that a lot of these Bitcoin people are doing, there's Bitcoin Beach, there's Hope House, there's My Premier Bitcoin, these like NGOs. And part of what they're doing is educating El Salvadorians on not only just how to accept Bitcoin for their business, but also save like a percentage of it to the side so that in the long run, those ups and downs will be profitable as Bitcoin just continues to go up in the long haul.
Right.
So, and how to sort of manage those, like when Bitcoin goes from, it was at 60 and then it dropped and it was at 30. And then over the last fall, because of all the scam stuff with FTX, it dropped to 15,000. So really how to deal with that. Like you're collecting when Bitcoin is only at 15,000 or 16,000, you're collecting more of it because the price is still set in dollars. Like lunch is $10 or whatever. So now you're just going to be collecting more Bitcoin. So the key is then to just set some aside. So there's a lot of work to be done, but they're also teaching people English. They're teaching, I went to Bitcoin Island. They're giving people like job skills and how to run a business and empowering.
At the strip clubs, what do you stick in the underwear? Because do you just rub your cell phone?
I didn't go to a strip club, but
Graham? How dare you let us down like that?
I'm sorry, that's my fault. Next time I'll try to go. I'm assuming they're still taking dollar bills at the strip club, but I wouldn't. If some young entrepreneurial strip stripper wants to have like a phone, she can like dance and then QR code and beep and then
You get, you know what it is? You get the RFID chip installed in a butt cheek, and then people get to swipe your ass cheeks.
Or you just get a QR code as a tattoo on your ass cheek.
There you go. QR code.
Which I'm thinking about doing myself.
Dude, just the audience requests alone. I mean,
just like Graham, show us your ass, and then it's like, well, if I'm going to show my ass, I should get a
donate Bitcoin.
Yeah, just give me some Bitcoin for my ass.
There's some buttcoin jokes in there that I'm not going to make. I'm not on this show. I have too much respect for the show, for you, for the audience,
for the sanctity of the show, the integrity. We've never made butt jokes or dick jokes on the show. We never will.
There's probably some tags in there where we could get the Clitcoin, but no, I'm not doing any of it. I'm not a part of it. Not at all.
I'm not going to make any jokes about a strap-on Bitcoin dildo. I'm not going to make that joke, Lee.
No.
I'm above that.
Absolutely not. I have another show for that, not on this one.
Do you have a different TV behind you for that one, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's when the porn plays behind me.
Oh, so
God, here's the question: would that show get more or less censored on YouTube?
Less. As long as you don't talk about war or the CIA, you'll be fine.
Literally, yeah. Just avoid talking about JFK, but literal fat cock on the screen behind me.
Just cocks, just thrusting across, just
no censorship.
None at all. No. But yeah, so anybody watching, I posted a couple of videos from El Salvador, but I have a wealth of footage and interviews that I will be posting on my YouTube channel. And I'm raising money to go back there in October, November to shoot a full feature-length documentary, and that feels like it's very close to happening. So, yeah, there's a lot of people within the Bitcoin community, investors and stuff that are excited about this project, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening down there. So, I see myself living down there at some point in the near future.
How far does Bitcoin go? Very far down there? Like you have a little bit, and you could be a billionaire down there, or?
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, it's affordable down there. It's not overpriced like California or most of America. It's I mean, there's a lot of money coming in there, so some prices are starting to go up a little bit. But
another important aspect of Bitcoin, which I'm sure you've talked about plenty of times, but is that people in El Salvador, I'm sure, but especially in the United States and many other countries, a lot of what they do is send money to family and friends in other countries, and there's essentially no fee or close to no fee for doing that with Bitcoin across national borders, whereas you try and do it via these other, you try and send dollars via these services, and they all take some hefty percentage.
Well, that's a great point, and that's a big part of the renaissance that's happening. So from 1980 to 1992, El Salvador was in a horrific civil war, which, of course, America backed the anti-communist group. And during that time, a lot of El Salvadorians moved to the United States and Canada. And now that the country is safe and they're using Bitcoin, a lot of people are moving back. A lot of El Salvadorians are moving back. And when the law was passed, they started sending money from the States down to El Salvadorians in Bitcoin. I mean, that already started happening. And so I think El Salvador is going to be it's enjoying this amazing renaissance. And I think, I honestly, my belief is that other Latin American countries are going to start doing what they did, because everybody in Latin America is like, oh, they're all saying this because there's all these tourists coming to El Salvador now that weren't there from other Latin American countries, from Brazil, El Salvadorians from the States and stuff. And everyone's saying, oh, I wish we had a Bukele in our country. So it was amazing, dude. It was really, you and I have talked a lot about it, that there is not a lot to be hopeful for in American politics, or the world for that matter. And down there was hope. And that was very enticing to me, and being around a community of people that are trying to build something and everyone's not fighting with each other. That's the thing about the Bitcoin community. It's so unique. It's people, all different walks of life. I was at this dinner party with all these people. Some people are, they don't believe in climate change or whatever. And And I said, well, the oil companies have done their internal studies and they pay to push climate. And everyone was like willing to listen to me. Nobody like argued or yelled at me.
Right.
I was the only guy at this party that was a vegetarian and not drinking. Nobody said boo to me, Lee. And when I left the party, my tour guide was there. And I said, you realize that I've been a vegetarian for over 20 years and equally sober for 20 years. And that would never happen to me. Someone would ask, why don't you don't ever drink or you don't have meat or anything, like there'd be at least a question.
You just say, I don't eat meat, and they go, you aren't from around here, are you, boy?
Yeah. Or they get all defensive and, I mean, I don't drink that much. I just have a drink once in a while. And I'm like, I didn't say anything to you about your drinking or they're just like, I mean,
Graham, you not drinking is an indictment of all of us. So it's really offensive of you.
Yes, exactly. That's the American way of like, everything's all about me. So you're not drinking, I'm going to get mad at or whatever. Nobody gave a shit down there. Nobody cared.
It is funny. I mean, I'll get a lot of, so I'm not with you on the sober thing, not currently, but I mean, not in the last 12 minutes, but I am vegetarian, and I get a lot of funny looks when I tell people and stuff like that. But it is always funny when someone goes, why do you do that? And I'm like, oh, you don't want to know. You don't really want me to talk about it.
I know. I was at a party with a guy who does grass-fed beef, and he's a Bitcoiner came from Australia because they didn't have really good beef in El Salvador. And he's talking about, we do a kill once a month, and he didn't give a shit that I wasn't eating
countries for better beef.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's a devotion to beef.
Yeah, it was a devotion to beef, but it was so cool because it was like I think that's sort of the attitude of Bitcoiners is like, we all agree we don't want the central banks. We don't want to mess with that. But it's like, you can believe whatever you believe that's cool. I was like, wow, in America, this would have been a fight at a dinner party. I mean, it would have been like, there would have been somebody would have got their fucking ass in a knot about something, and it's just like, and it was so refreshing to be around. It was really.
Well, in terms of the, just one last thing before we actually do have a big government secret story coming up in a second, but just one last thing. In terms of the people seem hopeful there, I covered a few weeks ago that or a couple months ago that there was a large study as to the country with the people that are most peace of mind, which is pretty close to hopeful. I mean, at least feeling good about your life and the world and everything. And top of that list was Nicaragua, where people feel peace of mind. And it's like, we are actively trying to coup Nicaragua right now because we are upset with the way it functions. And it has the most peaceful people in the world in terms of feeling peace of mind. Like,
everyone was cool with me, man. I didn't feel any. The one time when we went in the formerly really bad neighborhood, we obviously stood out and people were just kind of looking at us, but no one was like, it was refreshing and it was amazing. And I met somebody, I was like, I got to get this movie made. I got to make this documentary because I got to show the world what's happening down there and how cool it is. And then just personally, like, I see a much better quality of life for myself down there.
I mean, it sounds to me a lot like when I spend time in Target. It just sounds.
It's absolutely like that, Lee. That's the best comparison anyone's ever made.
Just people are so accepting and just open and there for the right reasons. Everyone's there.
Salvador is like Target. That's so, God, you really have your fingers on the pulse. It's like, it's if I didn't know better, I think you didn't listen to anything I just said for the last 3 minutes.
Oh man, that's a better name for the podcast.
I'm not listening.
If I didn't know better, I think you didn't listen to anything I just said.
It really sums up our friendship because it's literally just one guy talking and the other guy thinking of a joke of what the guy's saying, but not really listening.
I'm kidding. I know it's not like Target. It's closer to Trader Joe's. I get it. I get it. I get it.
Oh, all right. Well, let's get into our segment number 2. Lee Camp's talking about deporting radicals.
The tremendous U.S. history of simply deporting radicals. So I actually started this. I was going to do a segment on Emma Goldman, but as I read about this, I decided that I'll do her segment probably next week, and I'll still mention her a couple of times. But I realized this was a segment in and of itself. So this is from our article a while back in the New Yorker. 100 years ago, Ellis Island, which pretty much everyone knows, it's known for bringing in immigrants, right? But 100 years ago, the 27-acre patch of land in New York Harbor that had been the gateway to America for millions of hopeful immigrants was playing the opposite role. It had been turned into a prison for several hundred men and a few women, most of whom had arrived in handcuffs and shackles. They were about to be shipped across the Atlantic in the country's first mass deportation of political dissidents in the 20th century. Mass deportation of political dissidents. The year was December 1919. And I always like when I find segments that I also essentially don't know at all, and I didn't really know this at all. So it was December 1919. Oh, right before Christmas. How lovely. Many of them with tears in their eyes were writing telegrams and letters to loved ones. Many were, in the literal sense of the word, without clothes or shoes. There was no laughter in the line. And then as now, deportations severed families. One left a mother, the other a wife and son, one a sweetheart. They were getting kicked out of the country without their families. That the day's most famous victim of this deportation was Russian-born anarchist and feminist firebrand Emma Goldman. And I just want to mention the word anarchist comes up a couple other times, and I just feel like it's important. I don't consider myself incredibly informed on everything about anarchism and everything, but when it's used in an article like this, I think most Americans just think that means, setting everything on fire.
Right.
But the truth is, anarchism has a long history, and if you actually look at the term, just like hierarchy is certain people rule over, certain groups rule over others, and oligarchy is ruled by an elite business class. Anarchy is no rules, so no rulers above you. It does not mean just set up things on fire and kill people. But
yeah, that term has been so probably deliberately misrepresented. So when you hear it, it's just anarchy, and as a result, some people that call themselves anarchists don't even understand the definition that they've given themselves, and they're like, yeah, anarchy, no rules, and just and it's
there's some like that, and then there's a lot who do understand the definition, but they don't seem to get that when they say it to people, everyone just goes, oh, Jesus. Because they think it's like you just said to them, like, I believe in just burning everything and killing people. Like,
yeah. And they really need to work on their messaging.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is when and to some degree, it's almost been as bad about socialism. But it's like when in America, someone says I'm a socialist, it sounds like you're saying I want to steal your property and rape your dog. Like, so yeah. The propaganda has just been so effective.
It's so effective. Yeah, socialism is a great example because you say socialism, a lot of Americans think, oh, you want the government to tell me what job to have? And it's like, nope, that's not what I'm talking about at all.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. A government official would walk up and be like, you now run the Slurpee machine from here till you die. Yeah, that's it.
That's a government.
There will be Slurpee machines in socialist country, in the socialist America.
Seems like that's going to be a foundation of socialism is the Slurpee machine. That makes perfect sense.
Makes the world go round, man. The mass expulsion was so important to the U.S. government that despite the hours, like the middle of the night, a delegation from Washington joined the deportees on the trip across the harbor to the Buford, the ship that was going to take them across the Atlantic. So these are like Washington dignitaries coming down in the middle of the night on December 21st to proudly see and watch and be a part of the deportation of dissidents. The group of dignitaries included several members of Congress, most notably Representative Albert Johnson of Washington State, who was the chair of the House Committee on Immigration and Naturalization, as well as an outspoken and proud anti-Semite. He was also a KKK favorite and an ardent opponent of immigration.
How do you get that demarcation? How do you, hey, KKK favorite? Like, how do you?
Because he would bring, because every time they'd have a meeting, he'd bring zebra cakes, and they just loved him. They just loved him. They just devoured them. A lot of people don't know that.
And he made sure that the white lines are just a little bit bigger on the zebra.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You have thick white lines and a little. He would actually spend a lot of time scraping off the chocolate lines. He'd bring white and black cookies, but it'd just be half the cookie.
Right. He just cut off the black part and throw it in the trash, and then you just eat the white part. And they were like, "Oh, he's a KKK favorite."
Dude, a lot of people don't know that about KKK. They fucking love a zebra cake.
They do.
Anyway, 24-year-old Justice Department official oversaw a lot of showing the dignitaries around. That young lad's name was, would you like to give a guess, Graham?
Oh. 24-year-old.
24 in 1919. Don't say Pat Sajak.
FDR.
It was J. Edgar Hoover.
Oh, yes. Oh, it makes perfect sense.
Doesn't it? Hoover had met Emma Goldman some weeks earlier in the courtroom where he made the case for her deportation. So he was in charge of the court case to deport Emma Goldman, now one of the great American radicals of her day. And like I said, I plan on doing a segment about her hopefully next week. And the man who would become the country's premier hunter of such dissidents encountered each other one last time in the gallery of the tugboat. She was 50 years old, more than twice his age, but they were of similar stature. And he said to her, quote, "Haven't I given you a square deal, Miss Goldman?" Which I think means a good deal. And back then it meant a good deal. And she said, "I suppose you've given me as square a deal as you could. We shouldn't expect from any person something beyond his capacity." Basically saying, you're incapable of understanding the world in which I live and in which I'm fighting for freedom and justice. Anyway, that morning's mass deportation had been preceded by a crescendo of anti-immigrant rhetoric that will sound distinctly familiar today. And if native-born Americans were acting un-American, why not deport them as well? So it was like, we want to get rid of all the immigrants, all the immigrant dissidents. And then, even if we have native-born Americans, if they're against what we stand for in our American empire, which is racism and anti-immigrant, then deport them as well.
Isn't it great to know that you and I would have been deported?
It's wonderful to know. And I also love that the more I learn about the United States, it's kind of comforting to know we haven't changed much. We've really been steadfast. It's because you look around and everybody will say everything's worse than ever before. It's like, no, it's been pretty racist and awful for a long, long time.
That's been pretty consistent.
Yeah, it's been very consistent.
Yeah, we've been sticking it to dissidents and people that speak out about the government and minorities. We've been doing that since the jump. It's been pretty good.
Because, if there's one thing that's annoying, it's unpredictability, right?
Which America, very predictable. We're going to go after minorities and help out the ruling elites.
So this article says, why not go one step further and strip objectionable people of citizenship to make them more deportable? In 1919, alarmed by the growing presence of, quote, peoples of Asiatic races, meaning Asia, the Anti-Alien League called for a constitutional amendment to restrict citizenship by birth within the United States to the children of parents who are of a race which is eligible for citizenship. Basically whites. So basically, if before this law, if you had a kid in America, they're American. But they said, well, let's make a law that says basically if you have a kid in America and you're white, they're American.
Oh, God. There was an anti-Asiatic league?
Yeah. Well, it was called the Anti-Alien League, but yeah.
Okay.
Senator Wesley Jones of Washington State promised to introduce such a measure, a proposal not unlike today's calls to end birthright citizenship. That May, a cheering convention of the American Legion demanded the deportation not only of immigrants who evaded military service during the First World War, but of any men who evaded service. So, one thing that made these officials so passionate about deportation, especially on that night in 1919, was the Bolshevik seizure of power in Russia in 1917, which political and corporate leaders feared might incite militant labor unionists in the U.S., who had already shaken the country with a stormy decade-long wave of strikes. Lenin had written a letter to American working men declaring the inevitability of the international revolution, which scared the shit out of the capitalists. Post-war economic turmoil promised to make the country more vulnerable than ever to radical doctrines. That's what they believed. So, for these officials, the most worrisome left-wing group was the Industrial Workers of the World, known as the Wobblies. The number of members probably never exceeded 100,000, but the Wobblies caught the public imagination with their colorful posters during songs, flair for drama. So the Justice Department began a nationwide crackdown in September 1917, raiding all 4 IWW offices and the homes of many activists. I mean, and this just shows I don't think we've ever had freedom of speech. We love to wave the freedom of speech banner. It's like these folks are lobbying and fighting and speaking about a different economic system, a different government system that's supposed to be legal in our country.
Yeah. And 100 years later, we're still getting, you and I and people like us are getting screwed over by the big tech companies. I mean, it's just the technological version of what they were doing to these folks 100 years ago.
Yeah. In sealed boxcars, Wobblies from around the country were brought to Chicago's Cook County Jail. When they received news of the Bolshevik takeover in St. Petersburg, they celebrated. 101 leading Wobblies were charged with violating a long list of federal laws in a mass trial that still is the largest in American history. It ran through the spring and summer of 1918. The jury only took 55 minutes to render their verdict, finding them guilty on all counts. They were sentenced to an average of 8 years in prison, and tons of the IWW records, which the Justice Department seized, were later burned. So, largest trial in American history, all of them found guilty, basically for speech, and sentenced to up to 8 years.
8 years in prison for talking, for just saying we want more workers' rights.
Workers' rights, different style of government, workers should take over the means of production, that kind of thing. So the politicians that were worried about these immigrant swarms, they said the immigrant swarms were not just unseemly with their affinity for radical movements, they were a threat to national security. Many leftists, like Emma Goldman, were Jewish, and the most violent anarchists were largely Italian-American. In June 1919, one of them managed to blow himself up as he was planting a bomb at the Washington, D.C. home of Woodrow Wilson's Attorney General, Mitchell Palmer. The tenor of the deportation frenzy was heightened by the upcoming 1920 presidential election. Palmer, a so-called Democrat, had his own hopes for the presidency, and he was not about to let anyone outflank him on enthusiasm for deportations. Oh, it's good to know the Democrats have always been deporting everybody. But if you watch, I don't know if you know this, Graham, because you probably don't spend a lot of time watching Fox News. They will tell you every day that Biden doesn't deport anyone and just lets in all immigrants.
I know. It's such a great narrative. Yeah, that keeps the right terrified that Biden's just open borders. And it's like, no, Obama was nicknamed deporter in chief.
Yeah. Yeah. So the bombing of Palmer's house, which was clearly intended to kill him and his family, understandably left him terrified. 8 other bombs went off the same night. I mean, these people were organized, mostly at the homes of prominent politicians or judges. Some 5 weeks earlier, a mail bomb had exploded in the home of former U.S. Senator from Georgia, blowing off the hands of his maid, and 35 additional bombs addressed to cabinet members, judges, and business moguls were intercepted before they could go off. See, and we were told that the Unabomber had this idea first.
Yeah. Oh, no, this is a long, rich history of that in America.
Yeah, he was not the first to come up with it, but they won't tell you that. Immediately after the spat of bombings, Palmer founded the radical division of the Justice Department to track subversive activists of all kinds, and he put J. Edgar Hoover in charge.
Oh.
Dude, that guy was such a young upstart whippersnapper.
This is basically a supervillain origin story.
Totally. Wait till I get to the part where he accidentally walked into a radiation machine.
And this is how Lex Luthor was born. Anyway.
Within 2.5 years in his new job, he would amass a database of 450,000 cards on people and organizations, carefully linking them to documents in the radical division's files. And here's the thing, is back then, this is pre-internet, obviously, pre-computers, all that shit. It was not only when people found out about this were they horrified that the government would do this, have cards of information on somebody who just because they're being an activist. But of course, now it's not a card, right? It's a computer file. It's a database, and it's incredibly common. And in fact, it's supported by Democrats and Republicans alike. J. Edgar Hoover would have been like a milquetoast, no-name Democrat nowadays.
I know. He'd be like somebody that Hillary Clinton just rolled over on when she was in the Senate, just would have just pounded him.
Yeah, he'd just be like an Adam Schiff, where you're like, I think I know that name. I don't like. Isn't he just a dick balls in Congress? To those in power, signs of simmering revolution were everywhere. 2 rival communist parties each promised to reproduce on American soil the Bolshevik takeover. So there were 2 communist parties in the United States at the time. They both wanted to follow in Russia's tracks and have a worker takeover of the government. In 1919, amid the largest strike wave in U.S. history, 1 in 5 workers walked off the job.
Really?
Can you believe we have a history of 1 in 5 workers walking off the job?
Wow.
Everyone from telephone operators to stage actors. An unprecedented general strike even briefly shut down Seattle. In September of that year, most Boston police officers went on strike. If even those sworn to defend law and order were in rebellion, what would come next? ? Senator Henry Myers of Montana warned that if America did not hold firm, it would see a Soviet government set up within 2 years. So you can see that this is 1919, and this is why you and I have done segments on how the U.S. was actually more scared of the Soviet Union than they were of the Nazis during World War II.
Oh, easily. I mean, that's why. I mean, this just proves it. I mean, when you start really connecting all of these dots, first of all, you connect the dots of, let's say, a guy we've referred to many times on this show, Smedley Butler. How he would basically, America back in the 1800s was just an empire using its military for corporate interests. So you see that's
and early 1900s, yeah.
And early 1900s. That's the whole foundation. And that was becoming a global problem, which is why they had the Bolshevik revolution in Russia. So they were just like,
excuse me, this is going to be bad for business. And they knew because they saw it. They saw the big labor movement in the 1900s, in the early 1900s. And they saw like, this could really, so we have to crush this every possible way we can. And
yeah,
we're gonna open up a little 6-7 year window in World War II to say the Soviet Union's not bad, and then immediately make them enemies, evil again.
Yeah, and we're gonna avoid joining World War II for as long as possible, right? Because it was mainly Nazis versus Soviets, which we're kind of fine with. Okay, killing each other.
I mean, had the Nazis like wiped out Russia and taken control of it, we might have just partnered with them. I mean,
yeah, had they not gone after Britain and had Japan not, joined in, yeah. And we covered it briefly back when we talked about World War I and Woodrow Wilson, but he even sent, after being somewhat pressured, he even sent U.S. troops to Russia to try and undermine the Bolshevik Revolution. So at the same time, agent provocateurs played a significant role in the turbulence. Many came from this is so bizarre. I had to include it, even though it doesn't fit with what we're talking about exactly. But so these bombs are going off. Many of them don't go off. They're caught before they go off. But many of the incidents came from the ranks of private detectives. The three biggest firms had 135,000 employees. In July 1919, the U.S. attorney in Philadelphia wrote to Palmer to tell him that many of the most extreme agitators were undercover operatives actively stirring up trouble. Justice Department officials in Los Angeles concluded that private detectives, in order to create more business, had planted bombs in nearby oil fields. But none of this deterred Palmer, who was now on an anti-dissident crusade with mass deportations as his goal. Also, if you're trying to get elected president, it doesn't serve you well to give speeches about how it's private detectives sending bombs. You need to say it's immigrants. Immigrants and communists. I mean, some of them were, but yeah. 90% of communist and anarchist agitation, he maintained, is traceable to aliens.
God.
So
you really see how long this playbook has been in use.
Yeah, the anti-immigrant playbook, yeah. Emma Goldman, a prime target, was under close surveillance. Her mail was opened, her phone calls were tapped, her secretary, unbeknownst to her, was a government informant. Goldman believed that she had become a citizen 32 years earlier, so she thought she was a U.S. citizen, by marrying a naturalized immigrant, Jacob Kirshner. But Hoover contended that the rabbi who performed the ceremony was not properly ordained. Moreover, 2 decades after their divorce, Kirshner's citizenship had been revoked because he had falsified something on the original application. It was deemed that Goldman had thus lost her status as a U.S. citizen and therefore could be shipped around the world.
That's America's like MO too, is like find some Mickey Mouse technicality, so these guys can look themselves in the eye and say, we're just following the law, like, oh, come on.
No, it's utter horseshit. It's like, well, that rabbi, I don't know, he once played in a softball game on the Sabbath, and you are not allowed to do that as a rabbi, so that does not count.
A lot of rabbis played softball in the early 1900s. I mean, that's a known fact. So that's probably.
The crackdown at the time of Goldman's deportation came to be known as the Palmer Raids, although they were planned and closely supervised by Hoover. The first big raid rounded up members of the Union of Russian Workers, an avowedly anarchist organization that also offered classes and social services. Offices of the Union in more than a dozen cities were raided on the night of November 7, 1919, pointedly the second anniversary of the Bolshevik coup, and 1,182 people were arrested and interrogated. The New York World reported Desks were broken open, doors smashed, furnitures overturned, broken, books and literature scattered. The glass doors of the cabinets were broken. Typewriters had apparently been thrown on the floor and stomped on. Blood stains all over the floor, papers, literature. That's a quote from the Times at the time. Although that was from the New York World. The New York Times, although it backed the arrest, real progressive, acknowledged that a number of those in the building were badly beaten by the police during the raid, their heads wrapped in bandages, but otherwise were fans of what's going down. Foreign-born radicals began filling immigration prisons like the one on Ellis Island. All right, this is my favorite part, maybe. The Palmer raids reached their climax January 2nd, 1920, with night sweeps in more than 30 cities and towns. Their professed targets were the two communist parties, whose combined membership was no more than 40,000, but was 90% immigrant. Many of those arrested had only a tangential connection, if any, to communists, including in Nashua, New Hampshire, 141 socialists were arrested. In nearby Manchester, it was everyone dancing at the Tolstoy Club. They literally arrested everybody dancing at a club because it was a Tolstoy Club.
Oh, God. Can you imagine some guys like, hey, some girl invited me to the dance. Where's it at? Some Tolstoy or Tolstoy Club? I don't know. And then that guy's just getting hauled away. You're
I mean, she's a communist, but that ass ain't communist. And yeah, he went along anyway. Yeah, totally.
Those titties are American, I'll tell you that much. There's a lot of
but yeah, exactly. And I wrote in my notes, this is the part where Graham just stares in silence. out of awe. You're gonna like this one. Graham, are you ready for this one?
Yes, let's do it.
In Chicago, all the patrons at the Tolstoy vegetarian restaurant were arrested. They were going after the vegetarians, Graham.
Oh my God. First of all, I'd love to open up a Tolstoy vegetarian restaurant now.
Totally.
I'm going to open up a restaurant called Tolstoy's Vegetarian Restaurant. That's absolutely, I'm going to do that.
Absolutely.
And I want to do it in Chicago. And have this story like on the wall. So people are like, what's all this? You're bringing this from Russia? No. Vegetarians were rounded up in 1920 in this fair city.
And it says, workers eat free, capitalists
pay double.
Double. In Lynn, Massachusetts, 39 bakers were arrested, a third of them American citizens, in the middle of a meeting to discuss forming a cooperative. In New Jersey, a group of Polish Americans soliciting money for a funeral. In Philadelphia, the members of the I guess that makes it a socialist funeral if you're soliciting money. The members of the you're gonna like this one too. The members of the Lithuanian Socialist Chorus. And they were arrested mid-rehearsal. At least let them finish. At least let them finish the Lithuanian Socialist chant.
Oh my God. What's the threat of a socialist chorus? Like
that you could get an earworm that just spreads through Americans' brains.
Oh my God. They're singing in unison. What kind of chorus does that? Like what? God, this country's stupid.
Stupid and awful. Stupid. It's the worst kind of all. I'm trying to patent or copyright a word for it's run by sociopathic idiots.
Yes.
I don't know what word I need to come, but yeah.
Sosamoron or something. Something.
Sociopath idiots. Whatever. Idiopaths.
Idiopaths. That's it. That's
the one. That's the one. There are no complete records as to how many people were seized, but a careful study has come up with a number that the Palmer raids arrested 10,000 people. More,
Jesus.
Yeah, insanity. And this is a time in America's history when there were only 12,000 people in America.
Dude,
More than 500 of those arrested were jammed into quarters at Ellis Island, which ran out of cots and bedding. Several inmates died of pneumonia. In Detroit, some 800 men and women were held for up to 6 days in a narrow, windowless corridor of a federal building with a bare stone floor. In Boston, 140 prisoners in chains and leg irons were marched through the city streets, then locked up in an unheated prison on an island in the harbor. One prisoner killed himself. Palmer, with one eye on justifying these mass arrests and the other on his presidential campaign, issued a series of press releases. One was headed, "Warren's Nation of Red Peril. U.S. Department of Justice urges Americans to guard against Bolshevism menace." The department's press office distributed photos of prisoners taken after they had been jailed for days without the chance to shave or wash. And they captioned them, "Men like these would rule you." And Palmer published a magazine article warning that communism was, quote, eating its way into the homes of the American workmen. Its sharp tongues of revolutionary heat were licking the altars of the churches, leaping into the belfry of the school bell, crawling into the sacred corners of American homes, seeking to replace marriage vows with libertine laws, unquote. You know, they say everybody has poetry in them if you just find your true passion.
That sounds like fan fiction written by a psycho. Like, sort of like Halloween story written by some nutbag's blog or something like that.
Absolutely, but beautifully poetic, beautiful. It's like he found his true joy in life, which is deporting and murdering dissidents.
Yeah,
and just
right.
poetry just flowed out of him, like he was in love, like when you fall in love.
He fell in love with treating socialist choirs like they were demons that were infiltrate babies.
Don't forget Lithuania. That's the worst part.
God.
Palmer began predicting that nationwide communist uprising would erupt on May Day of that year. Palmer and Hoover had assumed that they could deport most of those seized in the raids. A law was passed in 1918 that said any alien who advocated anarchism or violent revolution or was with an organization that did that could be deported. However, one considerable roadblock, although it was Palmer's Justice Department that had the power to arrest people, deportations were under the authority of the Immigration Bureau, which was part of the Labor Department. And then the Secretary of Labor stepped down because of a family illness, and he was replaced by a 70-year-old man named Louis F. Post, became the acting Secretary of Labor. And it turns out this guy is pretty fucking awesome. Post, every once in a while you hear one of these little known heroes. Post knew and had published, when he was a journalist, many of the leading reformers and radicals of the day. Emma Goldman had been a dinner guest at his home, and he had managed in 1917 to prevent her from being deported, although he was powerless to do so 2 years later when she was deported. Being in government did not tame him, as it does seemingly everyone else who enters government and seems to be remotely left-wing. Being in government did not tame him. As the Assistant Secretary of Labor, he had boldly written to President Wilson suggesting a blanket pardon for jailed draft resistors. When he discovered that many of the raids had been made without warrants and with warrants based on faulty information, he invalidated nearly 3,000 of the arrests. He ruled that any alien subjected to deportation process was entitled to full constitutional safeguards. He ordered the release of many of those still held in the prisons at Ellis Island. He slashed the amount of bail for others. Palmer and Hoover were furious. Last little piece here. Despite the estimated 10,000 arrests made amid the Palmer raids and 6,396 deportation cases that Hoover's radical division prepared during this period, Palmer succeeded in deporting fewer than 600 radical immigrants.
Wow.
Palmer's Justice Department continued to issue dire warnings about May Day. However, May Day came and went, nothing happened, and the silence actually hurt his campaign because everyone realized he was a loon. Or plenty of people, a lot of people did. In 1924, Congress passed a law that for the next 4 decades slammed the door on all but a tiny trickle of immigrants. It barred Asians from entering the United States and assigned country-by-country quotas set to reflect the American population as it had been in 1890. Basically, when the proportion of Eastern Europeans, Italians, and Jews was small. However, Post struggled endlessly to preserve our dignities and to enlarge them. The Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis wrote about after Post's death, he resisted the clamor of stupid intolerance. He exposed its shameful, ruthless lawlessness.
And America never did something that bad again.
And we closed the door on being awful.
That was
good.
it.
You know, we learn from our mistakes. Say what you will about the United States.
That's all America does. Learn from its mistakes. And that's why here in the year 2023, we're just a great functioning democracy where everybody's taken care of. It's fantastic.
And there's so much more love for immigrants nowadays.
Oh, I know. It's so great.
Appreciation for the fact that they're humans like us and that borders are stupid. And yeah.
And Americans are so quick to realize that it was a billionaire that stole their job, not an immigrant. It's what's so great about Americans. They get it.
Yeah. I think we all get it. And, I think our next president will absolutely just be a true immigrant-loving man of no borders who wants to see this pale blue dot continue in a sustainable future for millions of years. Awkward silence.
Like, those words are never going to be spoken by an American president, but like ever. But we should note Annabelle Corley in the chat said, "Welcome back from Target, Graham." She did a super chat. So thank you so much for that. That was exciting.
Welcome back from Target.
Well, that sounds like the conclusion of episode 127. Back from El Salvador. Is there time are we doing our Patreon thing?
I'm cool with it. I have a little something for it.
All right.
I will tease that the little something I have is we have covered Columbus multiple times, but I have some new facts that are amazing about Columbus.
I'm sure it's only going to reflect on how much of a great person he was. I'm sure it'll be great.
It turned out he just really loved children of all races, and he took care of them no matter what.
We'll get into how he was like the original Epstein. But folks, go to patreon.com/government secrets. And you can learn all about Christopher Columbus and some other awful stuff that America's done and support our show for as little as $5 a month. And if you sign up today, you get to watch the live one and you get the archive of I think there's been 34 bonus segments that you get to watch. That is you can do that. So go on over there right now. And of course, go to grahamelwood.com and support everything I'm doing. And follow me online and watch my comedy special at grahamelwood.com. Manifest It. We just crossed 25,000 views, which is really cool, despite all of the censorship.
Nice.
Yeah. And I'll be dropping more videos from El Salvador the next week or two.
Cool. Yeah, all my stuff's at leecamp.net. I just changed my live stream schedule to Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So join me then. And LeeCamp.com is my website where you can watch a bunch of stuff. LeeCamp.net is my locals page.
Right on, folks. This has been Government Secrets, episode 127. See you over at Patreon.
See you.
All right, buddy. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for supporting our show. Thank you, everybody over on the Rockfin, OTR Trucker. And thank you to Holly and Blaze. And thank you to Annabelle. We will be over at patreon.com/government secrets in about 2 minutes. See you right over there right now. Thanks for watching.